All right. Let's start a bit on the fun side. Anyone remember what happened 12th of March 2020? There should be at least 20 people in this room that should know what it was about. It was the escape from Denmark that we did because I was supposed to have my first kind of AWS presentation in Denmark, in Dikenog. And a lot of the Swedes actually in this room, I see Pedro was there, I think Rasmus was there, Emil and a couple of others. Oh yeah, you didn't went there because you didn't believe it was going to happen, and it didn't happen. So it hurts me to say that Rasmus was right for the first time in his life. Uh, it was a bit harsh because we had a dinner on the day before, and while we were at the dinner having a good time drinking beer and eating food, we got push messages from the local news that Denmark is closing down, and all Swedes need to get the fuck out immediately. So the conference closed, or it was kind of done semi-remotely, but we had to get out because otherwise we would get stuck. So yeah, we were a lot of people in this room that sat frantically trying to rebook our tickets at the restaurant for immediate evacuation from Denmark. So it was a fun time, and I guess we come full circle now that I have my first presentation here today as an AWS employee with a couple of my friends that escaped Denmark. So my name is Fredrik Korsbäck. People sometimes know me as Hugge. I have the role of, let's see, Senior Technical BD, Business Developer for IP and Interconnect, or a BGP guy, or a Bridging Gap Protocol guy nowadays, I guess. So I work with BGP stuff for the bookshop, basically. So we kind of have three big topics I want to talk with you about today. It will take about 6 hours. So I hope you have all settled in. And maybe we can get beers tomorrow. So I will start with a little bit of advertisements for Manners, and then I will talk about AWS stuff after that. So, like obviously everything needs a primer, right? So routing incidents happens across the internet. I've been staying at this stage a couple of times, talking about a few of them as various companies. And as you know, probably 10,000 routing incidents last year, such as hijacks, leaks, spoofing. Some of them because someone was trying to do something bad, or it was just a mistake. We don't know how much is which, but we definitely know that both types exist. Some incidents are even global in scale. I guess everyone remembers the YouTube outage, right, in Pakistan, where YouTube was down for several hours because it was rerouted to Pakistan. And kind of after that, the industry changed a bit, I would say. But incidents has happened since then. This was 2008. That's ancient stuff, right? But yet we still haven't learned. So we need stuff to happen. This is some of the headlines I could find. The My Ether Wallet one was Amazon hijack. Was before we even started to do things and take this seriously. Like some poor guy lost a lot of bitcoins, right? And that was not fun. But from an infrastructure point of view, it was devastating for us because our DNS service, which is called Route 53, was down for several hours, just because someone wanted to steal some bitcoins from some guy. So it's like a multi-billion-dollar service is down because someone wanted, in the context of this, just some lump change in terms of bitcoins. So this happens all the time. The thing that happened last week was not the BGP hijack for Facebook, but it was an outage in general. And BGP gets global all the time. Either way, so Manners is an initiative from ISOC, so the Internet Society. It's something that's been going on for quite some time. I believe I have been at this stage before talking only about Manners, but I think we can deserve ourselves a little bit 5-minute reputation of what it is. So it is a framework for basically having good manners on the internet. Today there is 4 programs in Manners. So there's a network operator one, which I believe is hitting its 10-year anniversary pretty soon. There's one for internet exchange points. There's one for CDN and Club Providers, which I've been part of developing. And there's one for equipment vendors that was launched about a month ago, which is fairly new, which is also the smallest group in the Manners program. So what is it? So we can start with the network operator part, which basically has 4 actions that they want ISPs to kind of think about and do something about. So it is the filtering part, which is essentially to prevent propagation of routes that are incorrect of some sort. There is many ways to implement this. One could be RPKI, for example, IRR filtering, probably a combination of both. There's the anti-spoofing part, which means different things to different companies. But basically what it is to prevent someone using an IP source which aren't theirs. So it can be the BCP38 standard, it can be source address validation. It has many names and many ways of being implemented. Sometimes it's very easy. For an end user network, it shouldn't really be that hard. For a cloud network such as the one I'm representing, it's not very hard. But for a big transit ISP, it's really hard, given that multipath and those kind of things exist. Coordination is also a pretty broad topic. Like, make sure there is updated things in IRR records, in WHIS records, on your web page, PeeringDB, wherever there is places to document how to get in contact with the engineers or your abuse or the routing security department even. That is something that the Manners Initiative would like to see. Then there's the global validation, which essentially is two things. It is RPKI ROAS or IRR route objects, preferably both. So these has, by the way, been the same for about 10 years. The technology to kind of do these has also been pretty much the same. So there shouldn't be news. Almost every vendor and almost everyone has written multiple articles on how to get this going on Cisco routers or Juniper routers or Arista routers. So there is ways to do this stuff. Exchange points is fairly new. It is a little bit different since exchange points can or cannot be part of the kind of the global routing ecosystem, depending on how they operate. So on the route servers, which for example Netnod operates, where not every member, but members of the exchange point can peer with the route server and share routes with each other. So maybe 5 years ago, there was basically no security on any route servers anywhere. It was floodgates open, so any routes that comes in goes out. Now I would say that IXP specifically has been very good at doing something about this. I remember, I believe it was last year or maybe the year before that, there was a presentation at this conference on how Netnod did it. I believe it was maybe Emil that had that presentation on kind of how filtering works at the route server level. Looking at the Manners Initiative, I think IXPs might be the ones that has done a fastest kind of like uplift in this context. So I think that's great. The second action is kind of like a promotion thing. Like myself, I'm not super impressed by that, but it's I guess I'm here doing that today, right? But I think action one is much more important than action two. Then there's the protect the peering platform, and it is various amounts of things you need to do to protect the peering platform. Kind of what type of traffic you allow, like multicast, is that allowed or is that not allowed? Then there is two not mandatory actions, which is monitoring and debugging tools. These comes in many shapes or flavors. I, for example, would like to see much more MAC accounting on IXPs, or at least flow export, so that we can take telemetry from IXS to see if anyone on the far side is doing something bad towards us. Because today, we kind of need to know people on a personal level on IXPs to get this information. I think that's something we can do globally on a more systematic scale. And then there's the faceted global operational communication. I wouldn't say was never a problem for any IXPs. IXPs are typically extremely responsive when it comes to these things. That is the CDN and Club Providers. About 1.5 years ago, we launched this. So the launching partner was us. So AWS, Facebook, Microsoft, Google, Akamai, Cloudflare, and Brazilian CDN called Axiom, or Axiom maybe. So it's kind of the same thing as network operators, is prevent propagation of incorrect routing, spoofing, global communication and operations, facilitate some kind of routing information, which is RPKIs or IRR, and we should encourage Manners adoption, which is what I'm doing here today, and if possible, provide monitoring and debugging tools, because it can be hard to have like a standardized tool set that you give to peers on what you should do. Okay, cool. Then is the last part, so equipment vendors. They don't even have ready-made slides for that. So kind of what it is about is to have the vendors publish documentation or help on how these CDN cloud providers or IXPs or network operators can use their equipment to adhere to these principles. So there's the filtering part, how to do filtering on a Cisco device. So they have published a book. There's links in the Manners documents on where it's published, how it looks like, how it works. It looks pretty good, I would say, from a vendor perspective. Like most of these vendors actually had all of this before, so it was kind of like automatic approval to some extent. But I guess it will be really interesting to see when smaller type of vendors gets to this standard that these more common vendors, I would say, has already, like the MikroTiks and the Ubiquitys and these type of vendors that are today really hard at how do you configure RPKI on a MikroTik router. Like that is not a very easy task. So hopefully it gets that type of vendors thinking. And you would be surprised how many of those type of devices you will see out in the world that is actually the ones that causing these global outages. It is even though these vendors probably have the most installed devices, they are not necessarily the ones that always break, right? So we need it across the board, I would say. Okay, cool. That was the managed part. Let's switch it over to the AWS part. So we kind of first need a small primer on what AWS is. So we operate a fairly big network for a fairly large bookshop. We do not only serve the bookshop, we have, of course, the cloud as well. So we operate, I believe the official number is 22 regions. There will probably be someone shooting me if that's the wrong number, but I think it's 24, with like 94 availability zones consisting of these cloud regions. On top of that, we have a significant kind of like edge network. When we say edge, we mean like a regular POP that has CDN services. It has something called Direct Connect, which is a type of private circuit directly to the cloud. We have other edge services such as proxies, and there's new services coming along now, which is one of them are called Wavelength, which is, I think it's a very confusing name because it has nothing to do with DWF wavelengths, but it is basically mobile edge compute for 5G networks. So that is being deployed all over the globe currently, and that is also part of kind of the AWS edge. There's also outposts, which are you get the cloud to your doorstep and you install it in your own DC. So all of those is kind of what makes the AWS Edge network. We have something 300 or so locations currently. There's probably one more coming up when I have this talk. This year we built 6 new countries, despite the current problems getting people in and out of countries. So we built Indonesia, Croatia, Thailand, Mexico, New Zealand, and Vietnam. And that pace does not seem to go down. So we will build more countries for every year that goes by. Yeah, the IPv6 people here. Yeah, that's funny. I think Direct Connect has IPv6 though. I guess the IPv6 cabal here in the front knows exactly how it is though. But either way, so we have a lot of links all over the globe. We connect it, and we have something around like 500,000 peering sessions. So there is quite a bit of a surface area to implement routing security, which is what I want to talk to you about here today. So kind of where we are today. So this slide is actually starting to get a bit old. So I did a blog post, I believe it's nine months ago, that it kind of does a deep dive on what we do. But in short, what we are is, in terms of RPKI, we're dropping invalid prefixes in 100% of our border, which is quite a lot of dropped routes. So we at any given day, like we have 500,000 sessions. So like it might not sound as much, but we have millions of dropped routes currently at any given day because they are somehow invalid in terms of RPKI. We have signed today about 98% of our announced IP space. The space that is not signed is in Brazil. There, as some people know, you cannot really do hosted RPKI successfully in Brazil. You need to do it yourself. So you need to do what is called delegated RPKI. Today, always we have something called an IP vending machine internally, because we have pretty agile and independent teams internally, so they can build a service and they just go to the vending machine and they pull the lever and they get the /24 or a /48 v6. We build dual stack all the time. And I see John there was like, yes, finally. So they pull the lever, they get IP addresses out, and we take care of everything in between. So we make sure that they are routed, we make sure they are part of our filters, we have ROAS for everything. And when they give them back internally, we make sure to kind of deregister them, and if it's a more specific row, we delete that as well. So it's kind of like an automatic system. It's also a severity one system internally, which is actually a pretty big thing inside AWS. Like Sev1 services does have full 24/7 on-call rotation, and someone is typically need to take care of a severity one issue within like 10 minutes. So that is absolutely highest priority, together with like the cloud is burning or S3 doesn't have storage anymore. Like it's that style of importantness for us, given that probably during any given day we probably see 100 or so hijacks that is aimed towards us either by mistake or because someone is trying to do something. Given the surface of our edge, we see this everywhere, right? So some of them are super small. It can be in a single pop in a single location somewhere in the world. Someone is trying to do something funky. So we see them all the time. So if this stuff is down, we might have $1 billion outage if this is down for 3 hours. So we believe that this is an extremely important system for us. Looking a bit, so this is a screenshot from the NIST Rpi Monitor. Today, if we combine our two ASNs, we have two ASNs which we have on the internet. So it's 16509 and it is 146,108. Those two together has the second most IPv4 space that is signed on the internet after Comcast, which I don't think we will be able to beat any time, but maybe. So it is somewhere around the equivalent of 240,000/24 is equivalent that is covered by ROAS today. For the very careful ones, has observed that this amount of ROAS can also break systems. Because we publish these extremely frequently, like at any given day, we can probably publish like 5,000 new ROAs. And for some RARs, this has become a problem, that it is too high velocity of publication. But we've been kind of working together with RARs to kind of set the standards correctly and to help them also, because we are breaking their systems, right? So we would also like to help them to make sure that we don't break it again. So there's been a couple of interesting incidents regarding that the last 24 months. Especially since we also knew that a lot of other really large companies was doing the same thing as we did. Given this is all public, right? Like Aroa is a public part of cryptographic blob, right? So everyone can see what everyone else is doing. So we knew that Microsoft and Google and everyone else was coming too, and they have equally large networks as we do. So it had to be dealt with. If we're looking a little bit at unreachable networks, which I guess is the scariest part of enabling RPKI on a global scale, because that is the pushback that we got internally. Like I was obviously extremely pro RPKI when I joined, and there's always some managers and directors like, hey, but what if we drop traffic, right? It's like, yeah, what about it? Like if they have the wrong information, maybe they need to fix it. And it's like, oh, but it takes a long time. And it's like, yeah, but if we make AWS unreachable for them, maybe they fix it fast. And they did. So at the time when we deployed this, we reached out to basically every single network that we saw we had actual traffic with and that we knew was becoming what is called a true invalid. So there's two types of invalid networks in the terms of RPKI. It is really invalid networks that has no covering routes, which means that a network like us would not have this network in the table at all. It was like if we were to type in the route, it would be network not in table. And then there is the ones that are still reachable, but through a less specific prefix. So maybe they have ROAs for /24 that is wrong, but we still get the /18 or 19 or anything like that. We will still route on that less specific routes. So those are not really true invalid, and people would not really notice if there was something wrong with them. But we did fix, I think we had like 20 or so people or ISPs that we reached out to. It's like, hey, we actually have like a couple of megabits of traffic to this /24. We will not route on this whatsoever by 17th of December or whatever the date was. Maybe you should fix it. And actually all of them said, yes, that's a very good point. And they fixed it. Because we actually like, now that everything is kind of over, we did implement a system where we could kind of sideload ROAS on the side to fix problems fast if the other ISP couldn't fix them. We really didn't want to use it, and we didn't have to, but we could if we wanted to. But I'm more of the idea like maybe we should just take it away now. Like let's not fake ROAS for anyone. Either way, so if we look a little bit at unreachable networks today, these are, by the way, from a project on GitHub called RPKI Observatory, I believe, and they list true invalid prefixes which are not reachable by any network that does full origin validation. In Sweden, There is no one on IPv6, which is great. There is 3 networks on IPv4 that is today has prefixes that we will not be able to reach them. A lot of other networks that does origin validation everywhere will not reach them either. So there is, I don't know actually any of these companies. So Amati Foundation, Nordlu, and Packet Exchange has prefixes that are completely unreachable today from RPKI networks. So most likely they do not have customers that are interested in the services of for the likes of AWS. If you look a little bit on a global level, so this is one for V4 and one for V6. So the situation in India on V6 is absolutely devastating. So there is 13,000/48 equivalents that is unreachable in India. And this is something that we actually noticed quite a lot. I think India has been the country where we had most problems getting people to understand why we are dropping their routes and why we are not routing towards their network. Both on V4 and V6. Like V6 is really big in India. It is a country that there's ISPs which are V6 only. And we are cool with that. All of our services that is important in India is available over V6. So it is really nothing strange. But they have tons of customers that will not be able to reach us because their ISP has not registered their routes correctly. Same goes with Bangladesh, Philippines, Pakistan, and the US actually. All of these are also V6 heavy countries. They are countries that sees a lot of V6 traffic. So it actually a bit weird to me when I checked this out yesterday. It's like, wow, that is actually quite a lot for being countries that also has significant deployment of V6, that they have so many unreachables. So I don't know what that is about. Maybe they don't use AWS services, I don't know, but they should. I don't know. On V4, it's China has been dominating since day one on unreachable networks. The Chinese operators are actually pretty good at doing RPKI, but they're also pretty good at doing it wrong. So they do it a lot, but they also do it wrong. So we've been working with the Chinese ISPs as well to kind of get this fixed, but it's also like they're not really interested. So we'll see if we can get that down at some point. Same with India on V4 is also pretty bad. So 525/24 equivalents might not like sound as much, but that is like complete ISPs in Sweden has less space than that, right? So it is, I guess we will hear more about that in the CGNAT talk and that kind after, how much customers you can serve with 500/24s. There we go.
So I was wondering, do you think the people with the unreachable V6 networks just don't notice because of happy eyeballs?
I would think so. I would think so, or they do, or they are reachable on V4, right? So
Yeah,
it's most likely what is happening. Yeah. But I mean, we are, for example, reaching out to Indian networks all the time about like, hey, we drop a lot of your routes on V6. Like, maybe you should fix it. And then we're like, yeah, maybe. So I guess happy eyeballs has a lot to do with that. Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Cool. So if anyone is from these Swedish companies, let's fix that, because Norway, Denmark, Finland, Iceland has 0 on this list. So from Scandinavian countries, only Sweden and has completely unreachable networks. All right, cool. So where are we going? First, how are we doing on time? Really good on time, I believe, right, Pastor? Cool. Where are we going? So I guess this is the most interesting topic, the topic I like to discuss, given that I'm part of kind of the evolvement of where we're going from here. So the first thing we need to do is, or actually doing right now, is to invest and look more into delegated RPKI solutions. And we want our own publication, given that we run a pretty large CDN. We have a pretty good product to do our own publication of ROAS. And also, how do you run rsync at scale? Like, if anyone knows, like, please let me know. I have a position open for you. So what's cool with the delegated things, right, is that it's happening right now. Like 3 days ago, you could see our delegation come up for the ones that actually pay attention to RPKI, which I guess is really no one except me in this room. But if you do pay attention, you see that our things actually came up Monday. We're going to start to use it in the Lactic region for our Brazilian prefixes, but we intend to take this global, and we will absolutely move all of our space into this solution when it's good enough and mature enough, which I think will be very soon. And we'll see what the world's hold in this. It's still very new territory for most people. I know there's at least one person in this room that has some experience on this, and there really isn't many others that has done this yet. So for us, it's new too, right? So it's going to be very interesting. And kind of on the back of that, so we have something called Bring Your Own IP. It is when you bring your own IPs to the cloud and run the services on top of them for a multitude of reasons. So this is a service that is very popular. And today we only support it in ARIN, RIPE, and APNIC service regions. And we will activate it in AFRINIC and LACNIC regions as well with the help of delegated RPKI. Because today, if you want to do Bring Your Own IP, we enforce RPKI on the customer, which I think is great. There has been pushback on that as well, but we never bulged. So now every customer accepts it and they just do it. So that is great. I'm also part of ITF working groups, and we're looking for RSC or RTA adoption. That is something that will help us to bring our own IP. It is essentially addition to our PKI where we can add more fields to our ROA, so we can add more information, which is great for us because today we have some really quirky processes when it comes to bringing ROAS into AWS. So it is not very nice. The documentation is not great, or it's good documentation, but it's not a funny thing for customers to do where they need to import X509 certs inside a routing object. It looks really dirty, and a lot of people have questions about it, like, why does it look like this? It looks stupid. And it's like, yes, we agree, but it was the only solution we could find to make sure that we could tie the right addresses to the right accounts in the AWS console. So we want to solve this, and RSC or RTA is going to be the solution to that, and that's why we're active in ITF looking for that. As I said before, we will work with and reach out to networks that has invalids. We have a few people actually in this room in my team that has helping to do this, and we will continue to do that as well, and probably have it automated as well, that we will remind, basically spam people. It's like you're sending us broken stuff, like please fix. So that's going to happen as well. We also like the community projects such as Manners. Like we were happy to see the implementation of the vendor program. We were extremely active parts in the cloud and CDN program, and we would of course like to see more ISPs work in the fashion of like what the Manners is supposed to be. Like I don't really care if you join or not, right? But if you kind of follow the rules, I'm good. As I said before, help RARs to improve. Like suddenly RARs has gone from being bookkeepers essentially, like RIPE, APNIC, and ARIN. They just had to keep books and arrange conferences. Now they also need to operate critical infrastructure, which is new for them, and it is hard, and it's not something you do overnight. So we would like to help and improve together with them as we scale, as we go. Given that this is now almost at the level of critical DNS infrastructure, I would say. It should at least be treated as such. And they need to adapt their organizations and their operations to suddenly have probably 24/7 on-call support, which is not easy. And there's also some kind of on the echo there. I'm not sure if anyone is following the Manners discussions, but there's also a document I've been writing together with a couple of friends at Microsoft, Google, and Facebook on unified requirements for RIR's RPKI infrastructure. It's just to kind of make raise the bar a little bit on what we would like to see from RIRs going forward. For example, one thing is unified APIs. That would be great. Given right now our delegated RPKI product, we had to write 5 API integrations instead of 1, even though it is technically the same service. We need to reset IRR filtering again. I will not speak so much about this. I think Fredrik later will speak a lot on this topic, so I will not bore you with this. But it looks like we need to do kind of like a third run on IRR filtering. And it is definitely a presentation on its own. Like scalability is absolutely terrible. Today, like we cannot run it at our scale the way we want. There is simply no computer fast enough or any router fast enough that can do this reliable on scale. So today we operate something that was most likely be called a deny type of, so we deny a lot of things that we don't like to see, but that's a pretty wide net. So we need to move to an allow-based rule set, which some ISPs does run successfully, but we have not really been able to do it at scale. So it needs to, we need a third run on IRR, unfortunately. there is solutions to this, more long-term solutions, like that we can integrate a lot of this in RPKI. For example, ASPA is still very interesting. ASPOT profiles, where we might be able to not need IR filtering in the future. But as it looks like on a 4-year outlook, it looks like we need a third run. We also need to revisit prefix limit settings again. For various reasons. It's also really, really hard with the churn when you operate 500,000 BGP sessions to other networks to have an exact prefix limit towards that. So we need to revisit that again and maybe do a big community push on exactly what we think about prefix limit settings. Because today everyone does it a little bit differently. So I don't really have much more. If there's anything you need in terms of strategy or that kind of things, like my day job when I not do the routing security part is to take care of peering and interconnection for Northern Europe. So that is Scandinavia, Iceland. I also have basically all the cold countries, right? So it is Scandinavia, UK and Ireland, Russia. So if you need anything in terms of AWS capacity or want to talk about how we build networks in those countries, I'm your man. If there's technical operations, we have the peering TO team. They are actually here as well. So it's Victor and Henrik that previously worked for Netnod. They are part of the technical operations team. So it's halfway based out of Sweden, actually, which I think is pretty cool. That can help if anyone has any more technical questions in terms of operations of peering. That is it for me. Questions? Jan? Is it V6?
Thank you. Jan George 6 Connect. No, it's not an IPv6 question, actually. Yeah, it's still me. Actually, I got an idea. Do you think that the uptake of manners would be really, really fast and massive if those 5 CDNs that you mentioned there would put manners in their peering requirements?
You mean in terms of that we do not peer with networks that?
Well, you are entitled to say, look, if you don't abide to some standard, I will not peer with your network because you are a threat.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, sure, that would probably set the world on fire.
Exactly.
Given that we will probably then put 100 terabit worth of traffic down to some shitty networks pipes. So yes and no at the same time. Like from a like internet community point of view, yes, it would make sense. From like a business point of view, it would break the internet in 0.1 milliseconds, probably.
Well, you could say to your peers, sort of like, okay, you have one year of time to make it work, and let's revisit this discussion in 1 year, and then we see if we disconnect you or not.
It might be hard, right, to say that to China Telecom or AT&T or that style of companies, right? Yeah. Like I agree. It would work, right? It would definitely. But I also don't want people to necessarily join an ISAC organization if they don't want to, right? But if they like, it's a good recommendation, right? Like the recommendations are good. I totally understand why these large companies can't join officially. Like I probably spent like 2,000 hours of lawyers on our side to be able to join ISOC, right? Or to be able to join manners in ISOC. Like that's probably one of the more costly decisions from a manners member to have be done, right? And I know it's the same for other large organizations that it is, lawyers need to look at it, need to look at sanction lists, need to look at what are these people earning money from, like are there any collusion, right? So it's hard, but yes.
Just an idea. Thank you.
It's a good idea, though.
Just a question there. You had something about RPKI origin validation being a severity 1 service,
Correct.
and then you alluded to having a deny system for prefixes that are not correct. So does that mean that you actually have a real-time system that reacts to either if you're seeing routes that should have been filtered, or if you're seeing prefixes that shouldn't be there according to the policy, and then you go and provision in real-time filters to deny these prefixes on those sessions?
I understand your question, and I will answer with a yes and no, I guess. Like in some cases, yes, there is automatic provision of such deny rules, but it's not a catch-all or a perfect system by any means. But it does look for certain things we certainly don't want to see. and delete that. But most of it is actually passive, right? So we have a lot of passive deny rules. Like we would not like to see ourselves from anyone else, right? We don't like to see that a big ISP, let's take ATT for example, is suddenly announced by John Source Network in Slovenia, right? Like that would not make sense, right? Like AT&T shouldn't be there.
So pinning.
Pinning, yeah. Yes. Yes.
So do you? So there's a lot of, I think, best common practice here. I'm not sure if someone were to start an ISP from scratch, is there actually some documentation they can go to see, oh, yeah, we should do all these things? Because a lot of these problems that occur is because people don't actually know about it, and they're like, oh, I got the IP packets flowing, now everything is great.
Yeah, so I actually think there's two good sources for that, I would say. So the network operator group out of Netherlands, the Netnod people, I think they have a good collection of materials on their website. I believe they call it the route filter guide or something like that. Like, I don't know the exact address, but I think that is a great source of information where a new ISP can go and look like, hey, what should be the kind of the lowest bar I need to fulfill to be able to run an ISP successfully. So I think that is great. Manners also has good documentation. Also, Manners offers free training for basically anyone that asks. I'm part of the ambassador program for Manners, and we have we as ambassadors are happily go out to ISPs and kind of help them hands-on. There's also something called the Manners Fellows that has the same. So we've been arranging workshops. Typically, I would say this last year in underserved markets, right? So we have had several workshops and meetings in Mozambique, Angola, Senegal, and these things where this is complete news to most people in the room. Like when I come and talk to manners in this room, probably most people go back to emails like, fuck, not this topic again, right? Whereas in Senegal, it is like, we never heard about this, right? Like this is great news, right? So that's one thing. And I also actually would like to recommend, like I don't really like bringing up vendors here, but Juniper has a really good guide, I would say. It's called the Day One Book to Routing Security, written by actually one from NLOC Foundation, Melchior Almans. I think that is a great book. This, regardless of which vendor you have, yes, Cisco, Arista, doesn't matter. Like the book is, I would say, easy to read and comprehensible. So I would recommend that to anyone, despite of what vendor you choose to use.
I just want to add another resource. NNet Labs, who produce an RPKI validator software and also RPKI CA software, have a great set of, I guess, slightly more specific, or not specific, but yeah, they have some information regarding examples of how to set up various RPKI servers, but also like more generic information. It's not super, I guess, vendor specific. So if you want, like, oh, this is how to do it on my platform, yeah, it might not be the best, but still, it's a good resource. I think it's
called rpki.readadocs.io.
That's correct. That was the one.
It's a very good resource as well, specifically around RPKI, and it's also a community-driven thing. So I've actually written a few of those things on that blog as well, or blog, but the Read the Docs page. So I think that's a great one too.
Yeah, we got two questions coming in over the Mentimeter here. The first one is, when RPKI is fully implemented on the internet, what is the next challenge for routing security for the internet?
I don't know. I mean, it depends on what our fully integrating RPKI means. Like if we were to integrate RPKI as it stands today, we are certainly not done, right? Like we have no path validation still. So we still need a lot of other systems to kind of solve the path validation problem. But when we also get that, and that's still, you know, a couple of years away, we need ratification IETF on a couple of standards. We actually need vendors to implement it. We need software support to implement it. So that is probably something we would see on a six-year line. Then I don't know, you know, maybe we should look at BGPsec again, right? Like maybe that makes sense, since that actually uses RPKI infrastructure in the back. Mikael has died in the audience. But we'll see, right? We'll see. Maybe it makes sense for a couple of high-profile interconnects to do BGPsec. Who knows?
Okay, second question. What are your thoughts on that some RIRs wants to run their infrastructure on cloud hyperscalers, e.g. RPKI?
That sounds like the best idea I've ever heard. given that I know exactly which IRR you're speaking to. So I mean, there's probably a canned answer I need to say from my employer, right? But I mean, the cloud is there, right? It is. I think it makes sense to use it when it makes sense, right? And the example I know about, I think they actually has a really good balance between availability, scalability, and what you're trying to achieve, right? So they have a combination of both. And I think that makes sense. It is makes sense in terms of also because it's crypto, right? So like, how do we handle crypto successfully in the cloud? Like that is hard, and I think it's a good addition to what we need to do. I think that is the correct answer, so I don't get fired. Okay, cool. So obviously we drink beer tonight, and we speak about this in the pub, right? Yes, should everyone answer? Thank you.